And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Benjamin Handelman of CrossTheTiber.org. And we're talking about a situation that a lot of us find ourselves in, that is discussing the faith with family members and friends who are anti-Catholic. And there's so many different dynamics. And right before the break, Benjamin, you showed one angle of it. We're talking to a child, right?
Yep.
It doesn't matter how much you've studied or anything, you're still dad. And unfortunately, father figures in this culture is equated with Bart Simpson or something like that. And, it's funny, that story you gave about the parish priest. I found that too. It's weird. You could talk for hours and nothing gets through, but someone will come by and say the exact same thing. And all of a sudden it clicks. And, it's probably that family dynamic. Maybe God is humbling you by giving the grace in the other instance. But there is this weird dynamic. It isn't just a straightforward dialogue with a stranger or coworker.
Yeah, that's very true. And so that's one of the first recommendations I want to make is when you find yourself in this situation, recognize that maybe you're not the right person to be an apologist to them. Maybe it's your Southern Baptist grandfather who's just dyed in the wool, like he's never even thought about stepping out of his Baptist church or something, and he's just adamant, and he sees you as a child, even if you're in your 40s or 50s, you may not be the person to discuss the faith in that way with him. Right. If it's your child, maybe there are times where you are the right person, certainly when they're very young, right? Like you should be raising your children in the faith 1,000%, no question. It's commanded in scripture and by the church. But all children reach a certain point in their lives where they start questioning authority because they're children, they're growing. During that period, that late teenage period, maybe you aren't the right person to discuss the faith with them. And maybe, a talk with maybe someone at the parish, maybe the priest in our case, but maybe others can really help kind of get through some of that internal family baggage you may have and kind of help them see the arguments independently of your relationship. And it's important to kind of recognize that because the last thing you want to do is alienate your child over something like this. Because if you push them away, then that's also going to be tied into their faith. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to kind of like put them in a situation where their relationship with you is soured for some reason. Now their relationship with the faith is soured and they walk away from Christianity or walk away to something else. So it's really something you have to be careful of. The second recommendation I want to make is, so a lot of people, what I've run into is they'll watch debates and they think, I've watched all these debates. Now I'm ready for apologetics. And there's a lot of reasons that's a bad idea. But one of the key things is what you're doing in a debate when you're practicing apologetics on a stage in front of an audience or in front of a Zoom call and internet audience, whatever the case may be. You have specific points you're getting across and you're trying to win, so to speak. You're trying to win the arguments. But apologetics aren't about winning arguments. It's about like presenting the faith in a proper manner. So hopefully the person comes to your side. And when you're having a conversation with someone you know and love, you don't want to win the argument because they're going to resent you. It rarely goes properly. So a big thing I always say is ask questions. And I know I've recommended this on here before, but ask questions. If your atheist nephew comes up to you and starts questioning and he's repeating something he got from Dawkins or something simple, you just say, oh, well, I'm sorry, where did you hear that? Hey, can we discuss this further? Like, why are you saying there's absolutely no way we can ever believe in a God? Like, can we talk about this? Well, what was the first cause of the universe? How do you think the universe came to be? You can start asking these questions and kind of leading the dialogue along in a way that's kind of friendly and not so confrontational.
If you're the one shooting at them, all these objections or whatever, they're going to fire back. It's just a natural instinct. But if you can get them to start thinking critically about their own position and let them mull it over. I mean, that's huge. Actually, that's a far more fruitful area to be in than, shooting back and forth.
So I even look at this conversation I was having with a close friend about the second commandment and the way we number the commandments. Mm-hmm. And I presented the normal arguments as politely as I could, hey, we're looking at this later commandment as key, and this kind of fits in very closely with the first commandment. And I said, but at the end of the day, this doesn't really matter. Like what your exact list of the 10 commandments is, that's not really important because those verses in Exodus and Deuteronomy are still in both of our Bibles. So the real important thing is that you're following all of the rules laid out, because in those 10 commandments, there's actually like 17 or 18 points made, right? Like there's multiple things being said in each commandment. That's the important thing. Are you loving the Lord God? Are you not cheating on your spouse? Like these are the important things you need to think about. And in both of I would never go to a Protestant and say, oh, well, you don't care about coveting your neighbor's wife being a sin. Like, of course they do. That's ridiculous. And so conversely, I would ask the same courtesy. And at the end of the day, if I go to the catechism and those paragraphs on the first commandment, we're going to find, sure enough, it's talking about idolatry, what idolatry actually was, and condemning it. So sometimes we have to be willing to say like, well, look, here's the evidence I have. And if you want to know more, I'm here. But I don't really have a lot more to say on the topic because this is the argument. If you don't buy that argument, I understand and I'm sorry. But I don't want to you don't want to fall into that trap of just like getting really angry with each other and kind of shooting back and forth. This is a reason. You and I are old enough to remember, like there was a time where you're supposed to never discuss politics or religion at the dinner table, right? When you had big family gatherings. This is why, because it always leads to these, probably baseball as well. And football, but you don't want to have these kind of fights and well, maybe not chess. I don't know. But you don't want to have these kind of fights with a close family member because you want to be able to continue dialoguing with them. And even look, I have family members that will never become Catholic. They're still my family. I still need to love and honor them. That's also a commandment, by the way. And I still want to be able to kind of like spend time with them. There's other ways of sharing the faith than just with words. Sharing the faith is like living out my faith as a faithful Catholic. That's a way, and I'm not trying to go that fake Saint Francis of Assisi quote, but I mean,
right.
The way we live our lives is also a way that we are sharing our faith, and we want to kind of always be doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And because you've become the prime example of a Catholic that they really can't ignore, right? Because you're part of the family. So if you start, beating them over the head with a catechism or something like that, they'll just think, oh, well, that's how Catholics are. And look at, now that so-and-so has become Catholic, look at what they turned him into or her into. Where, if you live out the faith and show genuine love, I mean, that's a very powerful message. In fact, it's probably a lot more powerful because where do they put that on their cognitive shelf, right? This person should be horrible, and yet they seem to be even better than ever, Exactly.
And I look at, so the case with my sister, and I'm using personal examples because I want people to understand, like, these are things that have happened in my life.
Right.
My sister had zero interest. And so because I wasn't shoving it in her face constantly, she's like, wow, you're dealing with the passing of our dad way better than I am. What is going through your head about this stuff? What are you thinking? Like, can you explain these things to me?
Right.
That to me is an example of like a more valuable way of in certain cases. And I don't want to downplay like the actual words, because then a time came for words. There came a time for me to sit down and kind of go through, hey, how do you explain the universe being created? Well, here's how we look at it. How do you explain, like, why would we need Jesus? Well, here's what the church teaches on this topic about the incarnation. Being able to have those conversations is still important, but you don't get to that conversation if you don't talk to your family member because they find you annoying or like constantly harping on them, or there's other relational issues, as we mentioned earlier, where they don't, you fought too many times, they don't want to have conversations with you anymore, and they cut you off completely. Which in our modern culture is sadly very common and even encouraged these days, right? You never read articles about people reconciling with their parents. It's always about like, oh, this toxic family member, I'm going to cut them off. As Catholics, we can't do that. We always have to do our best to be, a positive influence on our immediate family. And we always want to do our best to reconcile with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And that means you have to cultivate the virtue of prudence, right? Know when to do it and when not to do it. Because there are circumstances where you kind of have to hold your ground and say, no, this is wrong. And, you're going to hurt yourself in your future and other people by doing it. But you really have to discern when's that right and when's wrong. And, whether you're going for the long game, right? Rather than
exactly.
The game. Yeah.
And I mean, there's certainly cases as a parent you run into that naturally, right? If your underage teenage child you catch them drinking or doing something else stupid, there's times as a parent where you're like, look, you're grounded. Like you need to really like understand I'm doing this not because I'm trying to deprive you of fun, but this is a serious thing, putting you in a lot of danger. It's the same when discussing the faith, right? Like some of these topics are, maybe abortion is an example. Like this is a really serious topic that really can cause ruptures in the family, but it's also important that you don't back down on some of these issues.
The nice thing with family members or friends is that you don't have to, you can say, hey, I'll get back to you on that, because you'll see them again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like in my personal experience, because you only get that one shot, put it off, take your time, and also don't do all of this all at once. Most of us can't process, information that way. So a 7-hour conversation at a family gathering is maybe not the best way to defend the faith, discuss it, and evangelize someone who's maybe anti-Catholic or kind of indifferent.
Right.
And while a lot of the things I'm recommending, I'm doing in the context of your family. And the reason I'm doing that is because if you run into an anti-Catholic that isn't close to you, you can just choose not to engage with that person in the future. If it's your own parents, you don't have a choice. And I know people that have converted to the faith that really can have these conversations. There's someone in our groups, and Gary, I know you've talked to him as well, where he's a Seventh-day Adventist. And he's really caught in a position right now because Seventh-day Adventism is so anti-Catholic, and his wife threatened to leave him if he continued going forward with conversion. He's really got to navigate this very carefully. He can't even join RCIA, even though he's 100% convinced. He has to be patient and do this properly because that's his family. He loves his family. He can't walk away from them. So how do you have those conversations? How do you do this? Sometimes he just has to, there's counseling involved. There's conversations that maybe your family isn't ready to have. Like it's really important stuff, and just cutting them out of your life. While I've seen some very young, inexperienced with life Catholics make these recommendations online, that's not the real answer. As someone my marriage is 19 years old in this fall. You should not be divorcing for any reason. And if you converting to Catholicism is causing frustration with your Protestant wife, rather than just like divorcing and cutting them out of your life, which is not at all an answer, you should be doing it carefully and taking your time. Because at the end of the day, if you believe in the faith, in the Catholic Church, you're going to be okay. Just God understands the situation you're going through. Move through slowly and make sure you take your time so that you can properly address things with your family, because marriage is permanent. As Catholics, we believe this. We don't believe that divorce is a real thing. So leaving your spouse over this just quickly, and it drives me crazy when I see recommendations like that. And they're like, oh, yeah, well, this marriage doesn't count. It's not a Catholic marriage. That's not actually what the church teaches. The marriage absolutely does count. It's a real marriage, and you need to honor it properly. And be like a proper head of your husband and faithfully and patiently guide your wife instead of just trying to like shove her through the door.
Yeah. That's husband and wife, especially when one spouse converts and the other one doesn't. That can be very tricky. And you're right, though. Again, you're looking for the long game. You're not looking for the short game in terms of, my spouse is going to convert and everything's going to be normal, right? And that's, and this is some advice for maybe some of you listening that are not Catholic, that are considering Catholicism. It's always good to bring your spouse along and have them share the journey. I don't know how many times I've seen people who would keep their investigations, kind of secret until they're absolutely convinced, and then they dump on their spouse basically out of nowhere. The reaction's never positive. It's always, it ranges from shock to, just full blown, you're not doing that. So you got to be really careful, use prudence.
Agreed. And that's especially because I've seen issues in particular with people that come from very anti-Catholic backgrounds. So they may be just a hardcore atheist, maybe some abuse happened in their past. Perhaps there's perhaps they attend like a John MacArthur style, church that really just is adamant that Catholics aren't Christians. And when you have these kind of conversations, it needs to be something that you're approaching as a family, right? You're two united as one. You can't make decisions like that without the other person. And that doesn't mean you're wrong, but it does mean you need to bring them along patiently and carefully with you. Yeah. And I've personally seen this happen more than once, unfortunately, and lumping in with this family thing. That's why I wanted to have this kind of conversation, because it's easy to kind of focus on kind of the rallying cry stuff about apologetics. Some of it is just really difficult and painful, and it's very much about like your relationship more than the actual apologetics arguments you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because grace builds on nature, and you got to have that foundation of that relationship to build on with all its, everyone has unique dynamics. And so it's definitely not one size fits all, when it comes to discussing the faith with family members that are anti-Catholic. We're coming near the end of the program. Any last points you want to make before?
No, I think we can kind of transition from there, because a lot of the points I'm making about discussing with family and friends, if you're thinking about converting yourself, we have our organization Cross the Tiber, and these are also things we may discuss. So, for example, we have someone with us, and she just converted, and she was kind of dealing with some of the stuff because her family is Seventh-day Adventist, and we do provide resources to those we're helping as well, because now her family is thankfully not as anti-Catholic as the previous person I mentioned, but being able to provide these resources and kind of help you if you are, having some of these conversations, and doing our best to help you, because as a new convert or someone who's considering converting, we always want to be careful and not put you in a position where you feel you're being kind of pressured or overwhelmed with information.
Yeah. So crossthettiber.org. And just give us a thumbnail sketch. What do you guys do? How do people get hold of you? That type of stuff. So
we're a nonprofit apostolate. We kind of help people that have questions about the faith. So if maybe you're not really looking to convert, but you're kind of confused by some of the contradictory things you've heard online, and you want to know, like, okay, great, these 10 YouTubers said this thing. What does the church actually teach? What we like to do is we have a Discord server, and we also do regular lectures with, scholars and apologists like Gary himself, who's quite a popular guest. We've had Michael Lofton on. Keith Nestor is going to be on soon. And
cool.
We'll have these kind of conversations about like different topics and help answer your questions. Like, what does the Catholic Church actually teach about justification and works? What does the Catholic Church actually teach about marriage and divorce? What does it actually teach on these topics? And we'll provide citations, give you the actual church teaching, and then hopefully guide you along. So even if you join RCIA, we're still kind of there to help. Not all RCIAs are created equal, but you still need to go through a local RCIA. We can't do that for you. And kind of help help answer these questions, give you a community to kind of have these conversations and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And you pair people up with people that have already gone the journey from your faith tradition. So they know what you're going through. Yeah, great stuff. Well, Benjamin, as always, the hour flew. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it.